Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today we're going to be stacking up a layer of pastel pumpkins and adding a cozy fall twist to this. If you love falling leaves, pumpkins, and a little bit of whimsical, you're going to love creating this little painting. I'm going to be showing you how I drew this puppy, and then I'm going to show you how if you'd like it to be a kitty, you can easily just change it. And then I'm going to walk you step by step through the watercolor steps of how I created this little gal holding on this big stack of pastel pumpkins. Well, let's get started. I'll show you the beginning steps of how I created her. Let's start with a quick little drawing lesson. I'm going to be showing you how I did the little puppy, some simple shapes, and I'm sure you could do it. And I'm going to show you how you can turn the puppy into a kitty if that's what you would like. So to start out, I'm going to start with just a simple little U shape. This is going to be the head. And then for the body, I'm going to be doing this circle shape underneath. That's going to be where I'm going to be building my body. Now to do his ears or his forehead, I'm going to come across here, up above, and then I'm going to come off at an angle. These are going to be the angles. And then I'm going to come down with the ears and I'm going to be touching up at that forehead. Then you would just erase whatever might be in there to create the little head. For the nose, I'm going to go straight down in the middle, make a little upside down triangle. The noses look kind of cute if you kind of can get them a little rounded like that. And then go down through the middle and then up like with a hook. Down and the hook that way. You could do a little open mouth or make that a tongue. That always looks cute. For the eyes, I'm just going to be doing them at an angle, little long oval shapes. For his simple little eyes, they look so cute. And then you can do little eyebrows. Eyebrows are going to give your face even a little bit more expression. Now to build his body here, to do the front leg, I'm going to be coming down from the outside of my circle, making his little front leg that comes like this. And then for his back, I'm going to be doing a rounded area here. So this is his back. I'm going to follow that big circle shape. I'm going to come around. Now to do the foot area, I want to go flat here. This is going to be his hind leg. So I'm going to go flat, and then make a leg for his paw area, and then his hip. And then when you erase this lines inside, you're going to have your little puppy shape. So that by coming out this way, that's going to be the front part of his leg. This is just a real simple shape. Now we need to add a tail, so you can make a little puppy tail that comes up and down and touches like that. Now, if you would like to make this a kitty, all you have to do is simply change some of the shapes. Let's change the back of the cat, because a cat has where it's going to come out a little bit, but then it's going to come down. So they have that little unusual hump that comes from their back. Now let's change the ears, because that cat's not going to have those down shaping ears. I would go all the way up with my face. And then there would be two little kitty ears. Kitty ears are fairly small. And then to help my kitty look like a kitty, I'm going to be adding some whiskers. So there's my kitty whiskers, and then all of a sudden I have a kitty face. We need to change the tail. I usually like to make my cat's tail going down and around my cat when he's sitting, because most cats will have their tail at that angle when they're sitting. And that's how you make a kitty if you wanted to have a puppy or a kitty. Well, let's go ahead and start the next part, and I can't wait to show you how I painted this picture. Before I get into the painting part, I wanted to mention I do have a sketchbook membership. I know not everyone likes to draw, or you don't feel as confident. I do have a sketchbook membership. It's very reasonably priced, easy to join. And that's where you can I give all of the line drawings for any of my paintings that I do on my YouTube channel. And I have like over 90 some drawings in there that you can take a look at. And then I give different sizes of this drawing. So you'll get some small ones that you could make trading cards with, or turn into tags, all the way up to like a little bit larger size where you could do it in acrylic painting if you wanted to. Mix it up, do some mixed media, whatever you wanted to, because honestly, once you have it drawn, you can paint it or create it any way you would like. So I'm going to include a link down inside of my description box for you to check out if you might be interested in that. Okay, now we're ready to paint. I'm going to be using two different boxes of watercolor today, a student grade so I can get my pinks I like, and then I'm going to be using my Paul Rubens colors for basically the rest of the painting. My first original painting I did on the Canson brand watercolor paper. It's more of a student grade, but this one I'm going to be working on is the Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper. I chose out my color pattern, those pinks, the aquas, the dark brown, and the rusty tones is what I was going for. I like that fall combination, a way to add a little bit of pastel to my fall colors. So I'm using some of the traditional colors, but then adding in a few of the pastel colors, and I decided to add those into my pumpkins and into my leaves. I first start out with the big rusty areas of my painting. So I'm going to be layering this color in on her pigtails, her pigtail ties, ooh, that's hard to say, her jacket, the base coat color of that, and then I'm adding a little bit of that color to the little fabric-y part of her boots. I'm going to be starting out painting all of the little rust areas that I want since I have that color, and I'm going to be mixing it to about the consistency of tea, no darker than coffee. I always want to start light and then work my way dark. With watercolor, you have to remember you're painting the shadows. So start light because those are your highlights, and then work your way dark by putting your shadows on. When painting this rusty area, I want to make sure I'm painting around the other elements like my pockets because I want those to be that more aqua color. I'm not going to want any of that rust color in there. Watercolor always wants to flow wherever your paper is wet, so you want to try to go around the items that you want to remain a different color. If I get too much of that rusty color inside of those pockets, it's really going to interfere with that turquoise color. It'll end up looking more of a brown color than what I'm wanting, and I really want my aqua color to kind of come to life in that area. So any of the rusty areas, I'm trying to keep just that color right in there. I'm going to have a little bit of help by using a round brush. I'm going to be using the number 6 in the Princeton Velvet Touch series. They're a great brush. They're a synthetic brush, and the round brush has a nice little point on it. In this Velvet Touch brush line, always the tips really do stay really nice and they'll snap back to the shape that you want. It works really well to use these round brushes when you're doing these smaller paintings. I'm going to concentrate just on those rust areas and see how my paint is drying. I know I'm going to be adding at least probably 2 to 3 layers. You can see me here now going in and tapping in the shadow lines. I'm going to be concentrating more at the shoulder area and around the edges of the cuffs, trying to leave the center a little lighter. You can always take your brush, rinse it all off, give it a squeeze, and then come in and lift some color if you would like to add a little highlight to the center of those areas. Down below where my pockets are, underneath that pumpkin, I want that to be a little darker. I want the outsides of my jacket to be a little darker. And of course, I'm going to be adding a tiny bit of shadow around the pockets and the buttons. With doing these smaller paintings, that's when these round brushes with those small little points really come in handy. You can get into those smaller areas. You can go ahead and just tap your shadows in without adding a line of color. Those little brushes really do help you create these small paintings. For my little gal's hair color, I knew I wanted to do dark brown. To help give her dark brown hair color even a little bit more life, I started with the rusty color first and then layered my burnt brown color on the top. You could even add just a tiny bit of black if you want to, but again, go gradual, build up your colors. If you go too dark, too quick, it's going to look very matte and chalky, and you won't have that same movement. So I'm adding the burnt brown colors and layering those on. I'll let that dry and see how much it lightens, and then I'll probably go ahead and add another layer of dark color to that area. After mostly getting the rust areas completed, I wanted to go ahead and start on the pumpkins. So I needed to choose a pumpkin that wasn't touching anything else that was wet. So that very top one was the one I went to. I wanted to have a feeling of that it was a white pumpkin, but to get it to feel like it's a white pumpkin, you do need to add a little bit of color on the top. By adding a little bit of the burnt brown color, watering it down a lot, I can come in and tap a little bit of color, leave a bright highlight of the white paper underneath there where there's no watercolor paper at all, and that's going to bring that little white pumpkin to life by having that bright white color showing through that's from the paper, and then adding a little bit of color to that white pumpkin area. I'm also going to be adding that rusty colors down at her socks. I forget all the sequence that I painted this in. Normally when I do my tutorials, I'm painting, recording, and then I come back over and do the voiceover. So if I do get things out of a little bit of a sequence, that's why, because I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. But you can see how I'm adding the little layers in here. I'm working on her boots, and to give those boots a little bit more interest, I made the outside tabs that look like they're on the outside of the shoe one shade of brown, and then I created the centers of her shoes a darker shade of brown that doesn't have any red rusty color in it. So that just gave her boots a little bit more dimension. I'm going to start building up on my puppy now, and I mostly use those same rusty colors, add some burnt sienna, some umber, and some burnt brown together. I'm going to start light, just like I did with the jacket, and then build my colors up. I am using the 100% cotton Arches watercolor paper this time around, and it's fun to see the differences of how this color blends. On the first one I used the Canson brand watercolor paper, which I like, and I really did enjoy what it looked like at the end, but I wanted to also keep on experimenting with my 100% cotton paper to see and work and practice to get my colors to blend. I'm going to be wanting to add a shadow to underneath his body, will be darker. At the top part of that hip, I made it a little darker. I wanted to have the base of his tail that connects to his body to kind of be more of a shadow. I'm going to be making his ears a little darker too, just to add a little bit more contrast to his face. I wanted to make sure I went slow on building up the color around his face. If I got too dark, I'm going to have a hard time seeing the little details of his nose. And I added some little pink cheeks on him too. So I wanted to make sure I built that color up a little bit slower on his face to make sure I didn't get too dark too quick, so I still would be able to see the details in the end. Here I'm mixing up some sort of teal color. I'm mixing a variety of greens, and then I'm using sky blue, and a little bit of Payne's blue is sitting off to the side. That's what I'm using to mix my teal colors, and I'm just starting to paint the middle-sized pumpkin. That's going to be teal. Her pockets are going to be teal, and then her little sock ruffles down at the bottom, I decided to make those teal as well. When I paint these little small paintings, I like to be able to mix my colors around, and that just helps bring it together and make a nice composition. So if I have a little bit of the painting or that blue color at the top, I want to bring it all the way down through. I'm going to be using some of that teal and some of the floating leaves up there to bring it more towards the top. And I'm going to be making my pumpkin, the leaves on my pumpkin, that same teal color too. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I'm going to make her mittens that color as well. Again, this is going to be a couple layers. Just let the paint dry, and then I add it on as I needed to. You might be noticing I haven't done the rusty bows on her jacket yet. At this point, I hadn't decided what color I was going to be making them, and I added the teal on, and then I had made the decision that I wanted to make them rust. But if I'm going to be making them a rust color and not teal, I need to make sure that that teal color is completely dry before I add any of the other colors there. Otherwise, they're going to run into that teal color. And I want that teal color to still remain bright, so I need to make sure I'm giving those teal areas plenty of time to dry, especially in those pockets before I were to paint an additional layer. For her leggings, I wanted to make sure I was switching it up to make them a little bit darker toned, something different besides her jacket color. So I chose to use the burnt brown color. That's what I'm using up in her hair, so it makes sense to bring that color down. So I'm going to be using that on her leggings. I'm going to be using that at the top of her pockets, kind of to add that darker chocolate color fur color. And that's the color that I'm going to be using on the inside of her shoe. So again, I'm taking those colors and mixing them throughout. I do add a little bit of that burnt brown color too on the pumpkin stem on the very top. I add a little bit of that color there as well. And one last area that I add that darker burnt brown color is for the buttons. It just kind of makes it all go together, and I love the composition of it, of having those colors throughout. The colors of the pink, the turquoise, the rust, and the dark brown makes a really pretty fall painting. I did decide to add one more traditional color to this painting, and that was the color of the yellow ochre. I made the cuffs on her jacket that yellow ochre color and added that to the bottom part of the fabric at the top of her boots. I added some of that golden color there, and I did take some of that yellow color and mix that with my background leaves. I used that same yellow color down in the bottom of the, I don't want to say grass line or whatever, I don't know what I want to call that, horizon line at the bottom, where I made 3 different shades of the color that I had used on my girl. So a stripe of the gold, a stripe of the rusty brown, and then a stripe of a mix of that burnt sienna, burnt brown color. That's the color that I made the ground that she's standing on. So it was a way to bring that color all the way throughout the painting. Hopefully that makes sense and it wasn't too confusing. To add the little tiny details to my dog, I'm going to be using my Velvet Touch 8 long round brush. I've talked a lot about this brush on my channel, but it really is a nice brush. It's got those longer bristles. It comes to a nice point. I'm still learning how to use it. I'm learning how to load it, what kind of strokes I can make with it. So if you feel more confident using a marker, adding all these little details, you can come back in after your dog has dried, and when you're doing your pen work, you could easily use a micron pen to do his eyes, his nose, and a little bit of work on his muzzles. And you can also add his eyebrows with that, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. But I do like this number 8 long round brush, and I'm practicing and using it, and I'm getting better at figuring out brush control. Now since the dog is dry and most of her legs are all finished drying, I can go ahead and work a little bit more on that horizon line, and I'm just putting in kind of a patchwork feel. It reminds me of a quilt, of having those lines and the colors, and I do go back in and use that number 8 long brush to add a few dash marks in it. It kind of reminds me of stitching marks, so it has that very much that feel of that cozy feel of having a quilt down below. These colors all play pretty well together, so even if they were to blend together, it would still play nice, and you might even get an extra bonus of having some shadows. But for this one, I did start with the yellow first, and then I bumped down an area and then did the dark brown, and I let them dry, and then I went back in and did the rest area to try to see if I could keep them a little bit separated. But you could do all 3 colors together. Now that the jacket is all dry and the cuffs of her jacket is dry, I'm going to start doing that pink shade of pumpkin. I'm going to be using mostly just the 2 shades of pink in my set, where one's a lighter shade and one's a darker shade, and I'm basically tapping them in at the same time. I started with the light one as kind of my base color, and then went in and was tapping where there might be a shadow. So I'm going to concentrate more at the top of my pumpkin and at the ribs, and then of course down below underneath her hands and her arms, that part of the pumpkin is going to be darker. By adding these very subtle little areas, it's going to give this pumpkin a little bit more contouring, and it won't look so flat by adding these little extra bits of shadow. I'm also going to be taking some of the rusty color, the umber or the burnt sienna colors, and I'm going to be tapping it in too while it's still wet, just to give it a little bit of kind of a dirtier, rustier feel to it. I wanted it to be pink, but I didn't want it to be like a shocking pink. So you decide how pink you want yours, if you would like it to be those pastel colors, and you can kind of tweak it a little bit by adding some of the burnt sienna or that rusty umber color in with your pink, just to kind of settle it down a little bit to get that more rustic feel. I give my pumpkin a little bit of time to dry, and while that's waiting to dry, I went back in and remixed another shade of turquoise. I just constantly go back to those same little wells and mix my colors as I go. That way my picture kind of harmonizes. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same color, but I'm using the same colors, but they're probably going to be mixed slightly different. And that's just a way I can get a little bit of extra depth into my painting. I'm using that long number 8 brush again, and here I'm adding the little detail of some striping in that area of where the pockets are. I'm going to be adding that same line feel on her mittens, and I'm going to make sure I add enough dark down at that ruffly bits of the top of her stockings that are aqua. So I just keep on checking my colors as they're drying and then adding the layers as I need to. I went ahead and started painting my leaves, and I was going to make them a little bit more subtle. I'm choosing the aqua color, the pink colors for my leaves, and putting in a little bit of the burnt sienna color to add the aging to it or just add that additional depth. But I'm going to be kind of using more of the pastel colors and then adding the little bit of rustiness on at the same time. I'm going to be mixing this wet on wet, so my aqua or my pink will be wet, and I'm going to tap a little bit of that rusty color on the top while it's still wet and let those colors blend in those areas by themselves and create that little bit of, I like to call it watercolor magic, where it's going to blend on its own. It's a very subtle, pretty look, but I like those colors mixed with that little rusty bits of color. I check that little area down below, add a few shadows if I need to. Again, I'm going to be using a little bit of that rusty brown color to add some shadows to those areas. My colors had kind of faded quite a lot while they were drying, so I'm adding another layer. Once my leaves are dry, I'm going to come in with just some clear water, and I'm going to be painting the water, the clear water on the back, and that's going to help get my colors to move around a little easier. I wanted to have a very soft, mellow background and not being very strong, so to be able to help me create that, I'm going to first paint my background using water. I'm going to be going around the leaves close by my character, but not putting too much water next to it. Because remember, watercolor always wants to flow where everything is wet, and I don't want a lot of that background color to carry into my character. So I'm just getting the paper wet before I add some of that. I mixed a little bit of the yellow ochre, some of the browns, whatever I had in my palette to create just kind of a warm color. And then I went ahead and I just brushed a really light layer of that color on. I wanted the focus to be on the character and the dog and the background and just have this real subtle wash in the background. To add the finishing touches to that quilted ground area, I turned my picture sideways and I'm going to be using that long number 8 brush. And when I'm creating these stitch marks with this particular brush, I just want to lay my brush down and kind of give it a little bit of pressure and then pull it right back up. And that's going to create those stitch marks. That works so much easier than trying to pull it. If you pull them, the lines don't look quite right with this brush. But if you just lay it down and tap as you go, you'll create these nice little stitches. I'm going to be using that same brush to go ahead and do the small little work on the pumpkins, little, I don't know what they're called, little twirly twirls at the top. The vine work, there we go, that's the word I want. The little pumpkin vines, I'm going to use that brush to create those as well. Again, if you feel more comfortable using a marker to do this line work, you can use that too. I'm going to go on to the next part is the pen work, so I'm going to give my piece plenty of time to dry, and then I'm going to be using a micron pen to add the pen work. Instead of doing a black line, this time I decided I would use this rusty red color of micron pen that I have in my stash. I don't even know the name of it, but the nib size is a 0.5. Since I was using the Arches 100% cotton paper, I have found that the nib size, the bigger ones, work better for this paper because the pens drag a little bit more. The paper absorbs the ink slightly different than what the Canson does. Canson watercolor paper has a sizing in it, so your pens will slip a little bit easier or move smoother, but on that 100% cotton paper, they drag a little bit differently. For the lettering up above, I'm doing a script lettering, so anything that goes down, I add an additional line. And the one down below, I just use a single line with my pen work. I don't consider myself a great letterer, but I do find if I change the font up a little bit, add some uppercase and lowercase, in the end, it's going to look just fine. I decided to add a little bit more vintage quality to my edges, so I took some of the Ranger's Distressed ink in the color Vintage Photo and created more of a shadow just around the edges. I'll include a link down inside of the description box. This set and this size comes in a set of 4 and has 4 different colors that I use quite often. It's come in handy several times. It's a great little set to have. Once this piece is completely dry, I can either seal it with an acrylic spray sealer or even wax it. Watercolor is not permanent, so if you think it might get wet, if you're not going to put it underneath glass, you do need to seal it. Well, let's take a look at what this piece looks like sitting in my studio. And here she's sitting with the rest of the fall collection we have painted so far, with whimsical scarecrows to beautiful pumpkins to happy little witches, and now this little cute gal with her stacked pumpkins. Here's a link to my sketchbook membership. If you would like to paint but you'd like a little help drawing, definitely check it out. Here's a playlist that includes all of the fall collection inside of there if you'd like to paint along as well. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It can really help my channel grow. Well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.